In 1946, Alexander Aljochin passed away as the reigning world chess champion, which led to FIDE, the World Chess Federation, having to come up with a different format to determine who shall follow him on the throne. In 1948, they host an event called the World Chess Championship Tournament between the top 5 players of the era: Mikhail Botvinnik, Paul Keres, Vasily Smyslov, Max Ove, and Samuel Reshevsky. The format? Quintuple round robin, that is 20 rounds in total, played in 2 months in The Hague and Moscow. We are going to look at the crucial clash between Mikhail Botvinnik and Paul Keres, the 2 players who are considered the favorites. It is Botvinnik with the white pieces, and he starts with d4, knight f6 by Paul Keres, c4, e6, knight c3, and bishop b4, the Nimzo-Indian defense. e3, castle, a3, bishop takes, b takes, this is all normal, rook e8, and now Botvinnik goes for knight e2, which is one of the options. You can also develop with knight f3 or bishop d3, but knight e2 is an interesting move, and soon we will see the idea behind this setup. e5, played by black, aiming to open the e5 since white's king is still in the middle of the board. Knight g3 simply responded, as this capture is not dangerous at all, we can take back with a c pawn. d6, bishop to e2, or bishop d3 was the other option. Knight bd7, these are normal developing moves, castle, and now c5. As you can see, black is placing his pawns on dark squares, and that's what he should do since he has given up his dark squared bishop, so he wants to place the pawns on dark squares and have the light squares free for his bishop. So this is a good setup when you are missing that bishop. But white does not care much about the c5 push since he's got the pair of bishops. And you know that the bishops love open positions. So here actually white is hoping for black to capture on d4 twice, and that would let the position be open up for the pair of bishops of white. Especially this c1 bishop would love to have a diagonal. f3, this is the point of the knight e2, knight g3 setup. He wants to push e4 and he wants to conquer the center, have a better control of the center. He's got already the d4 and c4 pawns there, and the c3 pawn supporting the d4 pawn, and now after e4, white would have more space for his pieces, and this knight in the future could jump to f5. C takes d4 was played by the Estonian grandmaster, which is a little bit puzzling to me, because I'm sure that he knew that for the bishops the open positions is what favors white, so this trade plus undoubling the c pawns of white is not the most precise move in this position. So as you can see here, white has these doubled pawns, and after c takes, finally white has got a very healthy pawn chain, plus the position started to open up for the bishops. Knight b6 was played, and now bishop b2. e4 was already an interesting option, of course. This is what white prepared, and then placed the bishop on e3. But bishop b2 also makes perfect sense, and after e takes d4, here comes an unexpected move in the game. One of the couple of unexpected moves we will see. You can take back on d4 with the bishop, with the queen, and with the pawn. And what Botvinnik does is none of them. None. He plays e4, and he says, I can take back any time. And he's right. He can take back on d4 later as well. Queen takes d4 was perhaps the most natural, not minding that this pawn is left there isolated because the d6 pawn is weaker than the c4 pawn, and later white will push e4, control the key squares, especially d5, and bring his pieces to the d5 to attack the d6 pawn. Now after e4, it is the same plan. The queen will capture the d4 pawn, which will allow a very powerful queen and bishop battery on the long diagonal. Let's see how the game went. Bishop e6, attacking the c4 pawn. We can either capture now to defend it, or, as in the game, rook c1, and now if rook c8, we take on d4 with the queen. Everything is protected and it's equal material. After rook c1, Keres went rook e7. And now, if you look at the position after queen takes d4, what we see is that white has got more space, first of all, thanks to these pawns. This is like a Maroczy setup against the Sicilian, at least the pawn chain looks like that. He's also got the pair of bishops, and the position is opening up. As you can see, we already have a semi-open d file, plus this long diagonal is extremely dangerous, the g7 square and the king. So those are pluses for white, plus his pieces are more active. The queen on d4 is very well placed, the rook is coming to d1, and this d6 pawn, the backward, isolated d6 pawn, it's actually not backward, it's alone, it's an isolated pawn, simply very weak, is going to be a target in the game. Queen c7 was played by black, and here I'm going to ask you to pause the video and try to find the strongest move in this position. What do you think white has played here, Mikhail Botvinnik, in this very moment? I hope that you have managed to find a solution or have some great ideas. The strongest move, the most powerful move in this position, is not the natural rook fd1, which is a good move. There's nothing wrong with that move. But there's something much stronger, which is c5. Opening up the position immediately, taking advantage of this queen on c7. D takes c5, rook takes c5, and now, after queen f4, he keeps attacking the queen, bishop c1. The queen goes back to b8, and once again it's your turn to pause the video. Because after having opened the d and c files, suddenly the position has completely changed. The queen on d4 is brilliant, as it was already, but now the rook is also active, and this bishop on c1 could have a potential dangerous setup. I'm not going to tell you where, but this bishop is going to be crucial in the attack. So yes, I'm revealing that this is about the attack, not on the queen side, which would be logical. We have just opened up the d and c files, but we are going to look at the king on g8 now. Let's focus our attention to the king side suddenly. How to start attacking the king on g8. Pause the video and try to figure out the right setup. Are you ready? Are you ready to hear this? The rook from c5 is swinging over to g5, because this is the real target. The g7 pawn, and behind it, the king. Ugh. Knight b d7, because that knight was already hanging. Hey, hey, there's a pin on the g file. So, what shall we do now? Are you ready to calculate a little bit? Okay, maybe a bit more than a little. It is tactics time. It is already a decisive attack, a final blow, just only after 20 moves. This is move 20, and white is winning. Immediately, on the spot, calculate, tactics, 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 how to create a winning attack. Right now, pause the video and try to figure it out. The idea, the most powerful move, the strongest sacrifice in this position is rook takes g7, sacrificing the rook for a pawn just so that the king comes to g7. Knight h5 check, this is the point. And now let's see what happens if, for instance, the king goes back to g8. We simply take on f6, knight takes, and after queen takes f6, which is not even a check, what is on the board? Well, it's an exchange down for white. Ooh, well done. But what we actually gained is that the dark squares are extremely weak. There was no dark squared bishop before, remember, but now they are exposed completely. This diagonal plus the h6 square. So, the e7 rook is hanging, and we are threatening bishop to h6 or bishop to b2, both with the deadly threat of queen g7 or queen h8 mate. Game over. There is no defense. There is no way to defend against the mate if you play something like queen f8 in order to bring the queen to the defense. Bishop h6, and goodbye queen, goodbye game. So this is an exchange up for black, but if you look at his pieces, the queen on b8 and the rook on a8, that explains everything what went wrong on the king side. Pieces on the queen side, unemployed, and the king in trouble on g8. This is a beautiful sacrifice. Rook takes g7, and after king takes knight h5, the game went on with king g6, but here once again, and for the last time in this video, I'm going to ask you to pause the clip and figure out the move that made Paul Keres to resign. So one more move for Botvinnik, and he wins the game. What is the move that finishes this beautiful masterpiece? Only 22 moves, and now move 23 wins the game. What is the move? Pause the video. Yeah, you got it? Got it? It's once again a surprising move because it's not a check. We could calculate checks, knight f4 and such, but this is stronger than a check. This is a retreating move, a quiet move. Queen to e3. Beautiful, isn't it? This cannot be captured because it's made either on g5 or on h6, the way you prefer. And not only that, the knight cannot be captured, but white is threatening both queen g5 and queen h6. Mate, there is no way to prevent it. There's no move, not a single move that can prevent the mate there. Game over. Botvinnik wins the game and later on the event as well to become the 6th world chess champion, while Paul Keres unfortunately never won the title and is considered one of the strongest, if not the strongest chess player to never become world champion. This tournament and the victory of Botvinnik marks the beginning of the Soviet era, with multiple world chess champions coming from the Soviet school of chess and Soviet players dominating top-level chess for decades. More on this in the next video, and don't forget about the exercises.